Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. The Tough Girl podcast is sponsorship and ad-free, and that's thanks to the monthly financial support of patrons. To find out more about supporting your favourite podcast and becoming a patron, please check out Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. All patrons will get their name on a dedicated patrons page on the Tough Girl website. All female patrons $5 and above are invited to join the closed Facebook group, the Tough Girl Tribe. I do just want to say a massive thank you to Joanna Emmert, who has recently signed up as a patron, to Philippa Cherryson, and to Cynthia Carrion, Maria Curtin, Tessa Moxie, Angela Bewick, Mel Fine-Later, and Beth Whitman. A massive thank you for signing up as patrons. I really do appreciate all of your support. Today, I'm delighted we're going to be speaking to Catherine Wallis, a plus-size adventurer, working mum who is doing ultra challenges around the world.
I am absolutely what you would call your average run-of-the-mill middle-aged woman who lives here in Australia. And probably the thing that differentiates me from other people is that about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided that my life was terribly boring and that if I really wanted to change that and get out and do things, I needed to start sooner rather or later. So I've made it sort of my mission over the last couple of years to look pretty much along the internet and find something that looks amazingly challenging and interesting, and then just sign up for it and work out how to do it.
You've done some phenomenal challenges, and we're going to definitely talk about those. But tell us more about your early life and growing up. Were you outdoorsy? Were you sporty? What was your childhood like?
Oh, look, not at all. I mean, I think growing up as a child in the 1980s, we were all pretty much outdoors people. We used to get sent out after school on our bikes to ride around the suburb and play in the bushland next to our homes. But apart from that, I was never really involved in any sort of major sporting endeavours, and I've always been someone who was quite academic and I was quite smart at school, and I think I really sort of focused on my sort of intelligence and intellect rather than being outdoors. So this for me has been quite a new thing and quite a big change.
I mean, you said like 4 or 5 years ago you were living, in your words, quite a boring life. When did you make this realisation? Did anything happen that made you think, hold on, I need to make a change here?
It's actually quite an unusual way. I had got a promotion at work, and I'm a person that's worked in sort of professional industries for about 20 years or so, and I'd got a promotion, and we had to write a new bio. And in our bios, it goes through your career, but in an Australian bio, in the last paragraph, you're supposed to describe what your hobbies and interests are. And I got to that point and I stopped and I realised that I'd actually got to the point in my life where I was so career focused, and when I wasn't focused on my career, I was looking after my 3 children and pretty much performing the taxi service for them that so many of us working mums do. And I really didn't do anything else with my life. And I realised that I'd become a terribly boring person and that needed to change.
Having that realisation must have been, really quite powerful, but also maybe a little bit daunting at the same time, because what was your next step? Like, how did you go about making that change?
Well, I did it probably not the way that I would perhaps recommend it to other people. I pretty much looked around on the internet and I just happened to find a local event that was a 100-kilometre hike in a loop circuit around Canberra called the Canberra 100. And I thought, it's a walking event. Anyone can walk. Maybe this is the change that I want to make. So I signed up, even though at that stage I probably never walked further than about 5 kilometres around my local lake. And I went, right, now I've got the goal, I've paid my money, I'm going to have to change my life to be able to achieve that.
Well, what started happening? What sort of changes did you start making? I mean, did you get any friends or family involved? What were their reactions when you told them about your 100K challenge? Did you think, right, I need to join a gym or start working with a personal trainer, or actually I'm going to develop my own program, or I'm going to walk to and from work, or, what were there, little changes or big changes?
So I started off by just making some little changes. I realised that probably I needed to look at the 4-month period I had between where I was and the event. And my family was very supportive. I mean, they had really realised that we'd gone down this path where really we just focused on work and transporting children either. So they were very, very supportive. I just started walking 2 or 3 times a week. and building up over time until I was walking a good 30, 35 kilometres on a weekend day. And it was actually a really nice change too, because what I found was I ended up enrolling my friends to come along and walk with me. I ended up spending more one-on-one time with each of my children if they decided to come along on a walk with me. And so the whole experience was not just an improvement in my personal fitness, but in my mental clarity and in my friendships with my friends and my relationships with my children.
How did it go, your first 100-kilometre walk? Was it what you had in mind, what you expected?
I was completely oblivious to what a big undertaking 100 kilometres is. I mean, I'd looked at the website and it talked about having drop bags and, so I dutifully collected my, spare socks and snacks and put them into bags to go at each of the stops. And then as I led up to about 2 weeks into the event, people started saying to me, have you got your support crew organised and who's doing this, that and the other? And I went, what support crew? I don't even understand what you're talking about. So I was completely underprepared for what a big endeavour it was. And then to make it worse, the actual day, even though the event was held in autumn, which here in Canberra is normally about 20 degrees, we had unseasonably hot weather, and it was 30 degrees at 8 a.m. and hit 38 degrees later that afternoon. So it was a horrendously hot day. But I think what I got out of that event, and I did finish, I finished 10 minutes before the cut-off in 28 hours 50 for my first 100 kilometres. But what I really learned about myself was that your mind is very, very strong and your body can do what you want it to do. You just have to keep going. I was kind of lying on the side of the path going, what on earth have I done here? And then another part of my mind would just go, hold on a second, I know you can do this. It's just one foot in front of the other. And I'd continue on and made it to the end.
I mean, massive congratulations. Just shy of 29 hours on your feet. That's a huge undertaking. What was life like afterwards? Was it a case of almost, I almost know the answer, but was it a case of initially I'm never doing that again? Or did that just sort of ignite something where you thought, okay, do you know what? I want to do one big challenge a year going forward. How did it lead to more permanent changes in your life?
So at the moment that I finished the race, I literally said, I am never doing anything this stupid ever again. That was the craziest idea that I ever had. And I think it only lasted about 6 weeks, which I understand from talking to other people is actually pretty typical. Within 6 weeks, I was back searching the internet going, okay, I did that. What's next? What can the next thing be that I do? And it's pretty much just spiraled from there. I would say that in the first year, I did sort of one big event per year. And then that's increased over time until I'm probably up to doing about 4 or 5 big events a year now.
So talk us through, what happened next? How did you pick your next adventure? What did you end up doing?
Yeah, so the next adventure that I picked was another Australian event called the Big Red Run. And it was 250 kilometres across the Simpson Desert in Central Australia. It was a stage race event over about 7 days where you did a marathon each day. And basically I looked at it and I looked at the stunning scenery and I went, a marathon a day? Well, I just did 100 kilometres, so surely I can do 42 kilometres a day and, do it 6 times. And again, with my naivety, that seems to be the characteristic of most of my adventures, how hard could that be?
Oh. Now, were you planning on sort of running this event, or was this going to be a walking event for you? And how did you train differently?
No, so back then all of my adventures were walking. So I focused on endurance walking and improving my speed. I basically trained for it by having a look at the elevation profiles and the distances and finding areas in my local area that matched that. So I didn't have any kind of formal training or coaching. I pretty much made up my training program myself and just committed pretty much every day after work to hiking up some hills and getting at least 5, 6, 10 kilometres in, and then on the weekends looking at a big sort of 30-kilometre hike to get some practice up.
What was the impact on your life of making this change of, starting to introduce endurance walking on other aspects of your life? Did you notice improvements anywhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many improvements by introducing this kind of activity. I think on the physical side, it helped me to sleep better. I was, more easily able to get up in the morning and spring out of bed, because I think you've had that oxygen flowing through your body and those opportunities. I think it also led to incidentally deciding to eat better and more healthy food, because I knew that would fuel my activities better. And then on the mental side, the increased clarity is just amazing. And I had a very stressful job. I worked probably 12 to 14 hours a day and was on call weekends as well. And so introducing this amount of physical fitness really allowed me to reduce those adrenaline, cortisone levels and be able to cope with everything much better at work as well.
So you signed up for the Big Red Run, 250 kilometres, your first sort of multi-stage endurance event. How was it? Take us back to that time.
I flew into Birdsville, which is a tiny little town in outback Australia. It only has about 50 permanent residents and was the hub for this event. And the whole landscape is just so totally different from living in a city environment. It's a deep red sand and pretty barren otherwise, with almost no trees, and certainly the rivers are riverbeds that are run dry. And it was my first real introduction to a whole group of trail running people and my introduction to the trail running community. And I turned up there literally knowing nobody. And people were already introducing themselves by giving everybody a big hug. And I thought, oh, wow, this is a really different group of people. And over the week that I spent there during the event, I really got to know this group of people, and they became some of my really good friends now who I've done a whole bunch of other events with. So I think the overwhelming experience for me was not just the event itself, but the community that exists in trail running that welcomes endurance walkers as well, and kind of creates that real family environment and family experience.
So how was it this time physically on your body? So, a marathon sort of every single day. What was it like on the second day, the third day? How did your body adapt? What was going on mentally?
Yeah, so what I learnt from this event was that for me, and it continues to be the case, I always find day 3 the hardest. So for me, there's always a pattern where day 1's got that level of, adrenaline and excitement of the first day, and day 1 always goes pretty well. Day 2, you feel a little bit more tired, but can usually make it through. Day 3, I always find, is the day when I really have to focus on my mind. It is the day that your mind plays all kinds of nasty tricks on you, tells at you that you can't do it, that you haven't trained enough, that you're not going to make it. And of course, there's a whole added level for someone like me who's a plus size person, a fat person, where you get yourself in that mental state where you start thinking, no, I'm too fat to do this. Why did I ever think I could do this? And start to internalize all of those things that people have said to you over the years and talk about in terms of people who are overweight. So I always find that day 3 is the day that you really have to focus on why it is that I'm there, focus on the fact that I have done the training, that I know I can do this, and that I can actually make it to the end.
The mind is so powerful, especially on like multi-endurance races. There obviously is the physicality of the event, but it's the mental side of things. What are the tips and tricks? You mentioned sort of a couple there, but could you expand a little bit more on mentally on how you flip the switch, or how you change your mindset, how you get yourself out of like a dark hole once you're on it, or when you start having these negative thoughts and other people's voices start coming in with saying things that do impact on you?
There's always going to be a point when you do endurance races where these thoughts intrude on you. And for me, the best thing for me to do is I actually stop focusing on the inside of me and just take a moment to look around, because most of these events that I do are in spectacular natural areas, whether that be forest or ice or desert or whatever it is. And I find that just the act of saying, no, I'm going to stop ruminating on all of these things and look out at the amazing environment that I'm walking in and walking through tends to be the switch for me to be able to change it over. Because once I can look at that and go, wow, how lucky am I to be here on my own 2 feet in this wonderful, wonderful place, and I am going to enjoy it, and I am going to get through this, and I am going to get to the end. And that's the thing that really works for me.
I actually found you through Instagram with your handle at +_size_adventurer because you've got some phenomenal pictures and images and these beautiful quotes on there. When did you start sharing more about your adventures, either through Instagram or social media? Did that were you always sharing as you went, or when did you realize that actually I'm having a really positive impact on other women out there?
Yeah, so it's relatively new for me. So I only started sharing in April 2019, and it was after I'd come back from walking 160 kilometres across a frozen lake in northern Mongolia. And I'd met a whole bunch of people there, and none of them were plus size. It's most common at all the events that I go to that I am the only one. And they said to me, do you realise how inspiring you are to other people with what you do? And I, of course, went, no, I've got no idea. I've really just been focused on, doing what I do. And they suggested that I start sharing it with other people. So I set up an Instagram account, and I'd never been on Instagram before. I didn't even really know what it was, to be honest. And I've just been absolutely overwhelmed by the kind of community that's created on these social media platforms, because there's really lots of people out there who are doing really inspiring things and who share their experiences and share their ways and means of getting through hardships. And I found that it's really been a very two-way kind of community that I'm really, really pleased to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love how you casually dropped in there that you just came back from a 160-kilometre crossing of a frozen lake in Mongolia. I mean, so you've started to sort of like take your adventures away from Australia, and obviously living in Australia, it's a very hot country, normally great weather, and I'm sure training can't have been that easy to find a frozen lake in Australia and deal with the cold. So that's a whole set of different challenges. Tell us more about Mongolia.
Mongolia is absolutely spectacular, and you're right, it's totally different from anything that I'd experienced at home. I mean, where I am, there's certainly no snow and there's definitely no ice. So I was really very much based on, doing some research about the kind of experience that you would have over there. And really, I thought, this kind of event is really just about dealing with the cold, because the entire event is across a frozen lake, which of course means it's flat. So there's no elevation to deal with. It's just the temperature. So the training for Mongolia was really based on pavement. So the issue with walking on ice is it's a very hard, unforgiving surface, and the surface therefore is really, really hard on your feet, and you can get really bad pressure blisters on the bottom. So my training was basically adapted to deliberately walking on cement pavement rather than on fire trails and in the bush, to try and build up that ability to deal with that on my feet. But the event itself in Mongolia is spectacular. If you've never seen frozen ice lakes before, I really recommend you Google it and have a look at some images, because it changes from beautiful black glossy surface to big chunks of ice and that are like panes of glass sticking up from the surface, and then areas covered in snow, areas covered in all kinds of different blue-coloured ice. And it's really something that I've never even seen before, never mind having experienced, and was truly one of the most unique events I've ever done.
And in terms of like logistics, like how did it work? Were you stopping off and camping on the ice? Or did you have to carry your own tent and sleep on the ice? Or was there any fires when you were out there? What was it actually like day to day?
Yeah, so the event itself is actually an organised event. So it's an event called the Mongol 100 that's organised by actually a UK company, Rat Race Adventure Sports. And they run it as a week-long event. So it was 4 days out on the ice. And basically the way the event runs is you go in vehicles on the ice, because they use the ice as a road in winter. That's how thick the ice is. And you drive from the very southern point to the very northern point of the lake. And then you spend the 4 days basically walking back. Now, the lake itself is World Heritage listed because the water in the lake is of amazing quality and there's no pollution in the lake. So you're not allowed to camp on the lake itself. So instead, if you could imagine, we did little sort of half circles where you'd walk out across the ice and then come in each night to the bank and camp on the bank. And the camping itself was in the massive Mongolian gers, which are like a big yurt, with about 12 of us sleeping in each one with a fire in the middle. And the fires would be stoked at night by the local crew as it got to down as low as about -35 at night.
Oh my God. I mean, That everyone who listens will basically know cold is not my thing. Like 35 degrees, I am there. I'm happy. Minus, wow. How were you? Is that? I'm assuming that's the coldest place that you've ever been. And how did you cope with that cold?
Yeah, so we were very well prepared. I had brought so many merino layers of clothing that I was pretty much ready to go, including, if you just took your hands, we had 3 sets of gloves, inner liners, then liners, and then big mitts over the top. So we were prepared for the cold. We were fortunate that we had most of the days were relatively warm. By relatively warm, I mean it got up to about -5, which was actually completely reasonable to walk in. But we absolutely had many, many layers. And I had a big jacket that was rated to -35 and a sleeping bag to -40. I've never had so much cold weather gear as an Australian.
So what's the key learning from that experience?
I think what I really learned from that experience was that I'm able to adapt to do a range of different things, and that I can choose experiences and adventures in really remote places, and that they are achievable.
Has it impacted on your confidence, or were you already very sort of confident already?
Oh, look, I think in the workspace I've always been very confident, because the workspace has always been about my intellectual capacity and about my people skills. But I've always had very low confidence about my physical ability. And when people, suggested a social volleyball game at work or that kind of thing, that would be like my worst nightmare, as, being exposed as being less than everybody else. And I think that what's really happened through this process is that I've realised that your body shape or body type, or even how good you are at the actual events, not really relevant at all. It's all really about participation and what you get out of having the experience with those other people. And it's not really about your level of talent at all.
You've done the hiking across deserts and across lakes, but you've also done swimming as well. How did that evolve, and when did you start getting into swimming?
A bit like everything else I've done, I was randomly looking at different events and possibilities around the world, and I came across this event called the Hellespont Race that's held in Turkey, that's been held for a number of years, that gives you the opportunity to swim from Europe to Asia, and it's based on a Greek legend, and also a very historical swim by Lord Byron, who swam that particular event in the 19th century. And I'd heard about it a few times. But then I became aware that an Australian charity called Soldier On, which is an Australian veterans charity, was taking a team over to do this race as a fundraiser for Australian veterans. And fundraising for Australian veterans is something that's very close to my heart and something I've done a lot of over the years. I'm actually an Australian military veteran myself and have lots of friends and family who've served in the military. So for me, this was an opportunity to combine an adventure with some fundraising for something that was really important to me. And I thought, well, I can swim, so surely I can train up and swim 4.5 kilometres across the Dardanelles.
Yeah. How did that go? Was swimming something that you were doing sort of on a regular basis, or was it this like sort of getting completely outside your comfort zone and sort of did you get a swim coach? What did you do to build up your swimming capacity?
It was something that was completely outside of my comfort zone. So the first thing I did was I went down to my local pool, having never swum for years and years and years since I was a child, and swam to see how far I could swim. And I made it about 800 metres, including stops at the end of each lap, and went, right, well, I've obviously got a bit of a way to go. So just like I do with everything else, with my hiking and now with learning to run and here with learning to swim, I just made myself a training plan and went, right, if I need to be able to swim 4.5 kilometres within an hour and 50 minutes, which was the cutoff, then I need to be improving at this kind of a rate per week, and that means I need to train this much and do this many sessions. So I basically just created my own training plan and down at my local pool. Although the other thing I did, which I'm really grateful that I did do, was I'd never swum in the ocean before. I mean, I'd played at the beach like you do as an Australian child, but I'd never done an open water swim. So what I did do is I found an open water swimming course that was held up in Sydney, and I went and did a 4-day trip with them where they basically taught me how to read waves and currents and swim in the ocean. And I'm really glad I did that, or I would have been really, really lost in the actual event.
Is this is it the Boris? The Boris?
No, so the Bosphorus is further north. So that is in Turkey as well, but this is further south. So it's basically it's Kanakali across to the Gallipoli side. of the Dardanelles. And what happens is that once a year, the Turkish government closes the shipping lane because it's actually the busiest shipping lane in the world, and they close it for 4 hours to allow this event to take place. The tricky part of the event really is that there's a really strong current that flows through there. So the biggest danger is that if you're not sighting properly on this particular swim, you can float out into the Aegean Sea and completely miss the other side, which we were warned about in advance.
That would be a shocker.
And the lovely local fishermen, they call themselves the catchers, and they line up their fishing boats basically at the bottom of the strait at the entrance to the Aegean, and they're there to collect anybody who gets off course and floats off into the distance so that they're rescued. So there's about 10% of the field that don't finish, and that's not normally because of their swimming ability. It's because they end up floating off in the wrong direction.
Oh my God, absolutely fantastic. So how was it? I mean, obviously doing the sighting, but being in the water, was it quite a nice temperature, or was it freezing, or?
So the water itself is very, very pleasant. It was about 24 degrees because it is summer in Turkey, and the water was very, very nice. But I have to say, from my perspective, it's the scariest event that I've ever done, the scariest thing I've ever done in my entire life. I probably wouldn't recommend a 4.5 kilometre ocean water swim as somebody's first ever ocean event. Having done it, I was definitely out of my comfort zone. And certainly when I was in the middle of that channel, I was actually terrified. I literally was just putting into place all of my strategies for controlling my breathing and for focus and for thinking about what I was going to do, because it really was, for me, quite scary as an inexperienced person to be out there in the middle of the water. And probably the funniest thing that happened was that I was swimming along and suddenly I saw these big white transparent things in front of me, and I thought, oh, I think there's some sort of plastic bag pollution here in the Dardanelles. And then as I swam along, I realised that they were jellyfish. And the only thing I could think in my mind was, because in Australia, jellyfish are all poisonous and they all sting. And I was thinking I didn't research this properly because I have no idea whether these things are poisonous or not. Having swum through them now, I can tell you they're not.
I mean, massive congratulations, a phenomenal achievement. Absolutely, yeah, brilliant. Just give everyone a little rundown of, so, you started your Instagram account sort of like April 2019 and really started sharing. And you mentioned initially it was one big challenge a year from 4 or 5 years ago. And now you're doing a lot more. Talk us through your 2019 and what you've done, and then what you've been doing in 2020.
In 2019, did start with the Mongol 100 that we've spoken about across the frozen lake. And from there, I was training for the swim across the Dardanelles to look after Australian veterans. And then the third big event that I did last year was an event called Race to the Wreck, which was a foot crossing of the Nambia Desert in Namibia. So I was back to the desert and back to sand dunes. And the dunes there are some of the highest in the world. There was a day where we needed to cross something like 17 dunes that were all about 90 metres high each. So that was a massive, massive challenge for me, and one that was exceptionally difficult because it was back to that really, really hot days and sand and time on their feet. So if you could imagine that your average trail runner in one of these sort of multi-day events takes about 6 hours to complete a stage, someone like me who's walking or mostly walking is coming in between 9 and 10 hours. And that extra time out on the course is more time on your feet, it's more time in the sun, it's less time at the camp at the end sitting in the shade or preparing your meals and those kind of things. So the toll on your body is phenomenal. By the time you get to the end of the event, you've almost done 1 or 2 days extra in terms of time out on course than the average person in the field.
How do you recover? Like, is there anything specific that you do now?
I think what I've learned is that when you finish a big event, I'm exhausted both physically and emotionally. I mean, it's a big thing to train for and do one of these events, and the adrenaline that flows and the sense of achievement when you finish an event is phenomenal. And then afterwards, in the week or two afterwards, I definitely get hit with what they call the post-event blues or the post-adrenaline blues, where your body just feels like it's kind of empty and you've had enough. And I've really done a lot of reading and research on it recently, actually. And the important thing for me is in that period is not to try and do too much. I think it's really important for me to make sure that I rest, get enough sleep, drink enough water, do gentle exercise, because I think if I just run from one event straight into the preparation for the next event, then I'm probably just back into doing what I was doing with my corporate life, where you get your stress levels up so high all the time that they never come down again, and it's actually just very bad for your body.
Tell us about what you've done in 2020 and what your plans are for the rest of the year.
The first event that I've done in 2020 was an event over in Kenya called Nambia, Kenya. And this is a trail running event. And it was a really, really fun event for me, because not only was it the first time that I was really attempting to run an event as opposed to just walking, but it's a family-friendly event. And I actually took my 12-year-old daughter, who's my youngest, with me, and she ran it as well. So we actually had the experience of doing a multi-day stage race together. And it included some spectacular scenery across the plains and lakes and highlands of Kenya. And the highlight for me was the opportunity to run next to giraffes. We had a day where we came down the path and there were just giraffes surrounding us on all sides. And then they followed us down the path for about an hour. And it was probably the most magnificent experience I've had.
Oh, that sounds incredible. And what a brilliant thing to do with your daughter as well. How did that work, being family friendly? Was there like a minimum age of the children that you could bring? What were the distances involved?
The event itself is family friendly and allows both children to come along just as accompanying volunteers, but they can participate in the event from age 12 upwards. The event had two distances, so they had a 10-kilometre short course, which was the one I did. So that was 10 kilometres each day for the 5 days. And then they had a longer distance, which was 20 kilometres each day. So the event allowed family groups to come along and for different members of the family to run either the short course or the long course.
I love that. I think that is brilliant. And you said this was sort of the first time running. How did that go?
Yeah, so it's I've proved to myself that I am what I thought I was, which was an extremely slow runner. But it was an amazing sense of achievement to be able to show myself that I can run, and I don't have to just be naming myself as a walker. And for me, it's a sort of a stepping stone to going on and doing further multi-day events of the kind that I had been doing, but doing them more as a run, walk, and maybe eventually getting to running the whole thing.
What are your future goals for 2020? Have you got many other events like booked in and that you've sort of committed to or that you're thinking about?
I'm doing 3 more events this year. So the first one I'm doing is I'm going back up to Birdsville in the Simpson Desert for a single stage event called the Simpson Desert Ultra. And I've been fortunate enough to be selected as the ambassador for that event, because the event organiser wanted to create an event that was really focused on people giving it a go. So I'm really pleased to be involved with that as the ambassador. And I've actually taken along a group of 10 women who come from all over Australia, who I've selected to join a special team with me. And they're all women who have never done an ultra distance before. And they've committed to, like me, when I started off at the beginning, going through a 6 or 7 month training program and then coming up and giving it their best shot.
Do you know, I love that, because actually sometimes I think it can be difficult with races that people spend so much time like focusing on the winners and the best times, whereas actually focusing on giving it a go, doing something new. And how fantastic. Oh, those 10 women must be so excited to be, going along with you and working together as a team and having that support in place. And it's going to be life-changing, absolutely life-changing for them. Oh, that's got me really emotional.
We're working together as we come from all over Australia and people have all sorts of backgrounds, and within our group we have body sizes ranging from a size 6 to a size 22. So we're a very diverse group of people, but what we have in common is that drive and that interest in pushing themselves out of their comfort zone. And I have to say I'm learning at least as much from them as they are from me.
Fantastic. Well, brilliant race. That's one of them. You've got 2 more things. I'm excited to hear what the next 2 are.
So I thought I'd do a swimming follow-on. So I'm headed to Sweden in July for an event called the Arctic Circle Race. And it's an event that swims under the midnight sun down the river that forms the boundary between Norway and Sweden and crosses the Arctic Circle.
Oh, wow. They're just getting better and better. Amazing. And then how are you ending the year? What's the final one?
And then I'm ending the year with an exploratory trip. I've been invited to come and test a possible future event for a travel company where we're going to the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, which is, probably you could call it Russian Alaska. So it's all beautiful, big volcanoes and forest. And we're actually being inserted by helicopter, hiking the volcanoes, and then pack rafting out. And the concept is to see whether it might form a potential future commercial event. And I'm really, really pleased and excited, and I'm feeling quite honoured that they would have someone like me as a plus-size person to come along and help test that, as opposed to just having the more traditional elite athlete body types doing that.
Absolutely. Well, you've got a hell of a 2020 plan. That sounds absolutely amazing. And I'd love for you to share, Cath, the best way that people can follow along with your adventures. Is it mainly Instagram, or do you have a website as well?
So the main way to follow my adventures is on my Instagram account, which is +_size_adventurer. I do also operate a website which is called Find Your Adventure Online. That website I've created to try and put all the adventure possibilities that I've found in the one place. So what I've done is these are not events that are organised by me whatsoever. I have no relationship to them. But what I've done is gone through and looked at events that are being held around the world that are really open and accessible for beginners, that have cut-offs that are based on about 4 kilometres an hour that pretty much anyone can train for and do, and try to put them all in the one place so that people don't have to try and search and find and do the research themselves.
Oh, that's fantastic and super, super helpful. So I'll definitely make sure that I put the links to your website, findyouradventures.online, and to your Instagram account as well, so people can follow along with these incredible journeys. But Cath, I'd love for you to leave our listeners with final words of wisdom, final words of advice about what you've learned over the past 4 or 5 years about making a change from leading, a boring life to now a life which is filled with adventure and challenge and travel and exploration. Please do share.
We're in a society that's always telling us what we should do and what we should be and what we should look like when we do it. And I think that what I've really learned over the last couple of years is that that's all actually just rubbish. It's actually not what's important, and people can actually do a lot more than they think that they can do. And so what I would really encourage people to do is start thinking about what it is in your life that you actually want to do and want to achieve, and not put that off until you match somebody's magazine's ideal version of the person that does that thing. It is absolutely the case that adventure is open to everyone, no matter what that adventure means to you. And what I've really discovered is there's also no such thing as failing at adventure. The very act of training for and going and doing one of these events brings so much in terms of joy and experience and excitement and happiness. It actually doesn't matter whether you're first or last at any of these events. It's the getting out and doing that's really important, and really, for me, has led to a much more satisfying life.
I echo that 100%. Absolutely. Cath, thank you so much for being such an incredible inspiration and getting out there and doing all these adventures and challenges, and thank you for sharing them as well, because it's so powerful getting your voice out there and getting your voice heard. And best of luck with all of your different adventures and challenges throughout this year and the many years ahead. It'll be fantastic to keep following your journey and all of those other women that you're inspiring around the world. But I really do appreciate you coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share your story.
Thanks very much, Sarah.
Hey Tribe, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Catherine Wallis. What an absolute inspiration. Make sure you do go and give her a follow on Instagram. Her handle is @+_size_adventurer. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes so you can find it easily again. Equally, while you're in Instagram, go and give me a cheeky little follow as well @Tough Girl Challenges. Now, I just want to give you 2 other podcast recommendations which you may enjoy as well. So we have spoken with Rochelle Olsen on August 23rd in 2016, an Aussie 30-something plus size everyday woman who cycled nearly 5,000 kilometres from Canada to Mexico, trekked the Inca Trail and hiked to Everest Base Camp. I'd also recommend taking a listen to Reagan Chastain, who we spoke to on April 5th in 2016, who is a fat activist and a marathon finisher who's promoting health at every size. More information can be found at toughgirlchallenges.com, which is the main website, the main hub. If you go and visit the website, there are links to all of my social media channels, to YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. You can also find links to the different vlogs that I have created from the various challenges that I've completed over the years. So I've done stuff like Marathon des Sables, the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Coast Highway, the Camino Portuguese, the Lycian Way, the Overland Track. There is a ton of information on the website. And if you are looking for inspiration or you're not sure what challenge you want to do next, just go through and scroll through the different podcast episodes that we have. I've interviewed cyclists, I've interviewed runners, I've interviewed mountaineers, Olympians, grandmothers. Just an example of a couple of the previous episodes that I've done. We caught up with Dr. Kate Leeming, who shared more about cycling the entire Nambian coastline, a 1,621 kilometre sand expedition. We've spoken with Sophie Rooney, who was the first woman to run the length of Scandinavia in 103 days. We caught up with Jackie Hill Murphy, and she shared more about her expedition to travel the length of the Amazon River and the Lost Inca Trail expedition. We spoke with Sonia Richmond, who's a 42-year-old Canadian who's currently hiking across Canada on the Great Trail, which is 24,000 kilometres. There is a whole range of women that you can listen to on the Tough Girl podcast. So please do go check it out. A massive thank you again to my incredible patrons. If you are a patron, thank you. Because of you, I am able to create this content. And because of you, I am able to share this and promote this. And so more women will hear these incredible stories and be inspired and think, you know what, if she can do it, then so can I. So what is it that you want to do? What is it that you have been putting off? Now is the day. Now is the time to take that first step. Take action today. You are the only person who can change your life. And if you're like Cath and you think, do you know what? My life is pretty boring at the moment. You are the only person who can change it. So please make that change. Take the first step today. Thank you so much again. New episodes of the Tough Girl podcast come out on a Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time, and Tough Girl Extra podcast episodes come out on a Thursday at 7 a.m. UK time. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. All right, take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.